This winter has got to be the most stacked lineup of isekai we've ever gotten, ever. I mean, even after excluding all the sequels, there's still a few other promising new entries into the genre that I think will make quite the impression. So let's take a look at every new isekai and fantasy anime that'll lead us into what's looking to be one of the best seasons we've had in a while. Starting with the sequels, I'm sure most of you are looking forward to Re:Zero and That Time I Got Reincarnated as a Slime. But don't let those distract you from Log Horizon's third season either. That's a sequel many of us have been waiting for quite some time now. So all three of these are definitely going to be worth the watch, especially since they each provide their own unique and entertaining portrayal of the genre. There aren't too many overlapping themes with them. As I'm sure you know, Re:Zero will be picking up right from where we left off in August, bringing us to the second part of its second season and the climax of the Everlasting Contract arc. So hopefully now we'll be getting a little less suffering and a bit more winning, but you can never really be sure when it comes to Subaru. Now, with Re:Zero coming to an end, Tensei will be starting the first part of its own two-core season, this one leading us into the Demon Lord Awakening arc from the novels. It's the part of the story that you definitely don't want to miss out on if you're a fan of Overlord. Not only does this deal with a similar kind of political affairs, but it also brings with it a similar style of power fantasy as well. So it's a good way to get your weekly fix of overpowered protagonist, especially when we've been watching someone as weak as Subaru. If you're looking for something a bit more in between, then Log Horizon is a less intense, more neutral isekai. It's actually one of the few that focuses a lot on the game elements, and that's the aspect that goes to make this anime as interesting as it is. Unlike a lot of other isekai, it's not just a story based around a character that's stuck in this fantasy world. It's a story that's based around the world itself. So the best part about this third season is getting to learn more about what this world is. As for the general plot, well, with a title like The Destruction of the Round Table, I'm sure you can guess that it's probably going to focus on that. It most likely centers on the falling out between the heads of the Round Table Alliance. So that type of citywide conflict should make for an interesting season. Now, to me the most promising new isekai coming this winter is Mushoku Tensei. But because it is a series that I want to talk about on its own, I'm actually going to skip it for now and talk about it in a separate video. What I will say though is that this anime definitely has a lot of potential to become one of the top isekais out there, especially with the recent confirmation that it's going to be at least 24 episodes. A story like this one definitely needs that many if it plans on getting properly developed. In any case, if you're interested in learning more about why this series is so hyped, then you can expect a video on that around January 10th. I'll try to get it out before the first episode airs on the 11th. Next on our list, we have an isekai that I've heard quite a lot about. It's the adaptation for the light novel, So I'm a Spider, So What? Ever since it was announced back in 2018, I've gotten quite a few comments asking when it was going to be released or if I was ever going to be covering it. Well, unfortunately, because literally every good isekai decided to come out this season, I won't have enough time to be doing a dedicated series on it. But the good thing is that it is finally here. In terms of quality, I'm honestly not too sure what to expect considering it's made by the same studio that did 2016 Berserk. But I do know that the source material is rated fairly highly. So hopefully all this CGI that we're currently seeing in the trailer isn't so unappealing that it detracts from the story. As for what the story's about, well, it's similar to Tensei in the sense that our protagonist dies then reincarnates as a non-human creature. But instead of a slime, she becomes a spider. One hatchling out of thousands that are sprawled all throughout this massive cave. As you'd expect, there is a points-based leveling system that allows her to get stronger. But the only way to get points and subsequently level up is by pretty much surviving. So that means beating stronger monsters or doing dangerous tasks. Now, this may initially sound like a typical dungeon crawl type adventure, but that's not all there is to it. Yes, there are the typical game elements and isekai tropes, but the way they're used aren't exactly how you'd expect them to be used. Without getting into any spoilers, it's another one of those isekai where the world becomes more interesting as it grows. So as long as the studio does a half-decent job with the animation, I definitely think this series would be worth your time as well. Moving on to the strictly fantasy anime now, first we have the adaptation of the light novel, The Hidden Dungeon Only I Can Enter. A fantasy adventure where the protagonist actually isn't overpowered at all. He's just a son of a lesser noble with not much to offer in terms of, well, anything. Although magic isn't one of his strong points either, he does possess a rare magical ability that allows him to consult a great sage. A person who can teach him and only him how to become strong. So, just like the title states, part of the sage's lesson guides him to this secret dungeon where he'll train and get stronger. That's pretty much what to expect from this. Next, we have Studio Liden Films' adaptation of the light novel, Suppose a Kid from the Last Dungeon Boonies Moved to a Starter Town, bringing us pretty much exactly that. A kid from a small village moves to the capital to become a strong adventurer. The only thing is that the village he moved from just so happened to be the village that's next to the most dangerous dungeon in the world. So him and all the other people that live there are just naturally strong. Of course, our protagonist doesn't know that yet. So when he goes to the city that's the starter town for adventurers, there's a massive power gap between him and everyone else. It's not quite the most groundbreaking story, but it also doesn't look all that bad either. If anything, it just looks like it'll be one of the more average shows this season. Now, there is one fantasy anime that I know for sure will be making an impact, and that's Redo of Healer. It'll probably be about the edgiest thing that you've ever watched. I mean, in comparison, this makes Goblin Slayer look like a kid's show. There's just a lot of revenge elements that purposefully go over the top to make this series what it is. So it's not really an anime that's meant for the more sensitive people. That said, if you're looking for an overpowered protagonist whose very existence embodies the meaning of the word sadism, then you'll probably really enjoy watching Redo of Healer. I mean, the whole point of this show is to see our main character get his revenge in the most fitting way possible. It's kinda like watching Shield Hero's trial episode over and over. Just add in a little bit more violence and a lot more nudity. Now, I'm sure a few of you are wondering how they're going to approach the more explicit scenes. Well, you'd be happy to know that there are actually two versions of the anime being released. A regular TV broadcast version where there will probably be a censor bar across the screen 80% of the time, then a more late-night edition called the Redo version where everything will be shown completely uncensored, both of which will start on January 13th. So be sure to mark your calendars for the inevitable shitstorm of hate that this series is destined to get on Twitter. The backlash could honestly end up being more entertaining than the show itself. Anyway, the last anime on our list is Studio Liden Films' adaptation of the game Hortensia Sage, a more standard fantasy adventure involving a classic tale of retribution. It's basically a power struggle in which an ousted heir must try to regain her spot on the throne. Now, the animation itself doesn't look all too bad, but because it is based off a mobile game, the odds of it being a well-adapted story aren't very high. Unless this has a very strong first few episodes, I don't think this anime will end up gaining very much attention. But yeah, that was pretty much every fantasy and isekai coming out this season. There are, however, quite a few other shows that are definitely worth watching as well. If you only look at sequels, there's Attack on Titan, Promised Neverland, Dr. Stone, Beastars, Cells at Work, Seven Deadly Sins, and even World Trigger. Then there's also the new sci-fi adventure Other Side Picnic, and a new superpower anime called Project Scarred, both of which look to be fairly interesting. So, as you can tell, winter 2021 has a very strong lineup to start the new year. It's a much needed season of sequels that I'm sure will each be very entertaining. So be sure to let me know in the comments which ones you'll be watching. But anyway, as always, thank you so much for watching, and if you enjoyed this type of anime content, then you already know what to do. So, until next time, ciao!